Great. Thanks everybody to Cameo's third Thursday webinar, Data Collection, Make the Case for Funding and Get It Right from Intake to Reporting. We're excited to have Sharon Miller and Kate Shepard from the Renaissance Entrepreneurship Center, Joyce Alvarez and Joyce Klein from Field at the Aspen Institute, who also run the MicroTracker Census program, which everybody will be glad to hear has opened today. And we'll jump right into Renaissance, and I will turn it over to Sharon and Kate.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for being on the call. I'm really glad that we are going to be on this webinar with Aspen because we started working with Aspen on the MicroTest project in 2004, and we've been involved ever since. So I'm assuming everyone knows what Renaissance is and what we do. Is that right, Heidi?
You can give them the skinny on that.
Okay.
I think that would help.
So,
just in case.
You know, Renaissance does small business development and training services. We have been around for 33 years, so we have a lot of clients that we have served over the years. And one of the great things, I think, for all of our organizations is that we have access to a lot of anecdotal information. And we have great client success stories, and we're so proud of their achievements, and we know them. And the individual stories are so great, but there is that need to have a larger set of data that we can pull from to really evaluate whether our programs are meeting their goals, and then also to talk to our funders to say why we are effective. So a few years ago, Renaissance decided that it was really time to update our data collection. We wanted to go deeper with the information that we were gathering, and we wanted to have a more consistent data pool to work from. So in our case, one of the challenges we had is that Renaissance has 4 different sites, and while that in and of itself should not be a challenge, each of the sites had some different funding sources, and each of the funding sources had different data requirements. So we were collecting data that didn't always look the same, and some of it was very mildly different if we were either tracking date of birth or birthday, and other times it was more significant in terms of demographic data. So we worked together as a staff to create a universal intake form. I thought creating this form would take like 2 hours. It did not. You know, it took several months because it gave all of us a chance to really talk in depth about the data we were collecting, why we were collecting it, what was it going to look like, and how we could best work together to have a universal way of looking at who we were working with. So we're very proud that now we have a universal intake form that we look at every so often to make sure this is meeting all of our needs. So for organizations who might have federal funding and state funding and city funding, as well as corporate and foundation funding, we really looked at how can we have one intake form that would serve all these different needs, including all of the different time periods of each of these grants. So our goal was really in having consistency in the data we collected and in the data stored. We worked with a consultant. We worked with Marion Dowd. Many of you know her. She's fantastic, and she really trained me to see that the data part of our work had to be very big and significant and upfront, so that now it really is part of everyone's job description, clear how much time people are going to spend in data collection and data analysis, and making sure that organizationally it's a top priority. So we developed a theory of change to make sure that we were seeing that the inputs we were creating were leading to the outcomes that we wanted to have. So we identified our inputs as the resources we put into our programs. I think we all have the same resources, staffing, consultants, facilities, assorted costs to keep our programs going. The outputs that we started tracking were really how many classes we had, how many workshops, how much consulting we were delivering. So those were numerical. Those were pretty easy things to track. And then, of course, where is this leading? You know, our outcomes are businesses launched, business grown, increases in business revenue and household revenue, jobs created. You know, does what we're doing lead to our high-level mission goal? So we then really looked at taking this information and using it for fundraising purposes, but then also to inform our decision making. So we really started to be able to see what the outcomes are for different services we're delivering. What are the costs of the services we're delivering based on outcomes? So the more information we wanted to gather, we found that as long as data was good going in, it's going to be good coming out, and it's been very helpful in making some of these larger decisions in terms of which classes we should offer, which times we should offer classes, and what clients really need. So I'm going to turn this over to Kate, and Kate is going to get into the real nitty-gritty of how we do data collection. And take it away, Kate.
Thank you, Sharon. I appreciate it. So I was trying to think through what would be helpful for this group to hear about at this webinar. And I just got to the conclusion that I should just tell you what Renaissance does for our data collection and why we chose to do it that way, and what kinds of things we report on and how. If there are questions that you have related to how this can carry over into your organization or the reasoning of the decisions that we made, please feel free to type them into the chat box. And I know Andrew is on the line helping me make sure I see those questions as they come up. If they're questions that are kind of timely, I will be happy to answer them in the middle of the presentation. Otherwise, we will wait till the end for any questions that you have. So basically, I'm going to go over how we gather data to report those outputs and outcomes that Sharon was talking about. And the big picture of how we do that is that we gather intake data when people come through our doors. We can use that intake data to report on outputs. We gather follow-up data from repeat visits when people come back to us or from surveys. We have two different surveys. Our survey process involves a quarterly mini survey as well as a long survey that we do annually in partnership with the Aspen Institute. And we use those survey responses as well as any repeat visit data to report on some of our outcomes. So when it comes to gathering intake data, this is also referred to as baseline data. This comes from our clients' intake forms, and this is an incredibly important first step if you're interested in looking at the outputs and the outcomes of your organizational work. The need for baseline data is, first of all, to be able to report how many clients you serve, what their demographics are. That's output data. But it's also needed to report that outcome data because you need to be able to compare data to what the data was when the client came in the door. For example, if you know that a client was taking an owner's draw of $60,000 annually, you don't know if that is an improvement or not unless you have the intake data to compare it to. So we gather that intake data from those universal intake forms that Sharon was talking about. We have both a short version of that form that we hand out to clients, so we just have a a small touch point with, like clients who just come to one of our orientations or just come to one quick workshop. And then we have a long intake form, which asks all the same questions as the short intake form and then some that we hand out to clients who are taking more of our intense classes or who have a longer relationship with us. We also have some intake forms that we have to hand out that ask additional information that's specific for different funders. For example, any San Francisco client that comes through our doors and receives a significant enough level of service fills out an income form that the City of San Francisco's grants require with some additional information. And as many of you on the line know, we also have 641 forms, which are counseling forms for clients who receive counseling through WBC funding. So then we're able to report output based on that intake data. Sharon covered this a little bit, but just to review, outputs and outcomes are two different sort of levels of data. From output data, we can know how many people are served, how many classes we offered, how many loans were received, demographics of our clients, average class enrollment, things like that. Outcomes is sort of the impact step that's next, which is how many businesses were launched, how many jobs created, retained, things like that. However, even though just this intake data alone doesn't let us report on outcomes, it's still incredibly important to report output. And we do that monthly, both for internal and external reasons. Internally, it just helps us double check our data entry. I send out a monthly report to anyone in the organization who's responsible for data collection or data entry into our database. And it helps them just scan it over and make sure nothing's missing, make sure everything seems right. It helps us track our progress towards our goals, whether those goals be internal goals we created for ourselves or grant deliverables that we're accountable to. And then it also helps us report for grants, as some grants require a monthly report. What becomes more powerful is when we can compare the intake data to follow-up data and report on outcomes. So gathering follow-up data is the first step to that. The easiest way to gather follow-up data is from repeat visits. We all have clients who choose to come back and receive more services from us. So anytime a client comes back after a certain amount of time, we might ask them to fill out an update form. For us, we choose to do that if they haven't filled out a form in 6 months. We ask them to update us on how they're doing. The 641 forms, the counseling forms for the WBC-funded consultations, they are also helpful and sort of serve as follow-up data as well, since clients are asked to give us an update on how they're doing on those forms. And then I always try to make sure that there's a data-minded staff member, which in Renaissance cases is all of our staff members, since we really work that into the job description. But just make sure that there's a staff member at any graduation or reunion or any event where clients may be sharing successes. And we just jot that down in notes and update their records in our database accordingly. Another good source, it's a little more challenging to gather data from surveys, but it's incredibly important, is to get survey data. And we do two different kinds of surveys at Renaissance. We have quarterly mini surveys, which was a recommendation by Nielsen, the data analysis company that does a Nielsen Cares program as part of their pro bono work. And we also do annual long surveys in partnership with Aspen Field MicroTracker survey. So to go in a little more detail about our survey process, the quarterly mini surveys are short surveys, very short, 6 questions, that are sent out via email to any client who receives an intensive level of service, in this case 10 or more hours, within the past year. So you can see from that little diagram, a client begins, for example, an intensive course with us that's over 10 hours long. 3 months later, they get a mini survey. 3 months after that, another one. And that continues until the client has received service for a full year after receiving 10 or more hours of service. If if the client keeps coming back and keeps getting services at the rate of 10 or more hours a year, then we keep checking in with them and seeing how they're doing. The long surveys are conducted over the phone to a sample of clients that were actually served 2 years ago. We are in the middle of conducting these surveys now, and we're surveying people who received services in 2016, asking about any successes or updates they have from the year 2017. So you can see these surveys are very different in terms of how they're executed, in terms of the kinds of questions we answer. They're also very different in terms of their purpose. The quarterly mini surveys, while we always want to make sure that our response rates are as high as they can be, our goal for the quarterly mini surveys is not a high response rate. It's actually just to stay in a positive relationship with our clients, connect them to any services they need. It's kind of the subliminal goal is to help increase our response rates for the long surveys that we conduct every year. The purpose of those long surveys through Aspen are to make sure that we're helping our clients achieve their goals, to be able to gather good outcome data from those. So details about our quarterly survey. Oh, I see a question about the mini survey. I'm happy to share a copy of the mini survey. I'm going to share a slide shortly with what the questions on it are, but I'll also share my contact information in the chat box once this presentation's over, and you're welcome to reach out to me and I can share that with you. Thank you for the question. So the quarterly mini surveys, we were fortunate enough to partner with Nielsen, and we were one of their Nielsen Cares projects. I would encourage you, if this sounds like an interesting partnership to you, to check out the Nielsen website and apply for one of their projects. It's really great. They pair you with data specialists and just give you advice on how best to move forward with whatever data challenge you're having. In this case, our question for them was, how do we stay in touch with our clients, and how do we evaluate how well our programs are working in terms of those outcome metrics? And they gave us some great advice. And this was one of the things we took away from that. We sent a survey. We send a survey every 3 months to everyone who's received 10 or more hours of service in the past year. We send this survey out via Google Forms, which, if you're not familiar with it, is a great free tool that allows you to send a survey or a form in the body of the email itself. So the email you'll get could say, hello, please fill out this survey, and then right in that email, it's not click here to fill out the survey, it's fill it out in the body of the email itself. We sometimes choose once a year or so to give out reminders for those surveys via text message, just for folks who don't check their email a lot. And we've actually found that text messaging was especially helpful and worked especially well with our Hispanic clients for some reason. So we just try to reach out to clients in whatever way is most convenient to them. Just a quick note about being able to send emails, being able to send surveys in the body of the email itself. Previously, I worked with Habitat for Humanity, Greater San Francisco, and there I was able, we sent out surveys after volunteers volunteered on construction sites. We sent out very short surveys, 2 questions actually, and we used to send them out in the form of click here to fill out the survey, and then we transitioned to a system where the survey was in the body of the email itself, and our response rate jumped, over doubled. So it used to be about 4% response rate. After we sent it out in the body of the email itself, it became 10% response rate. So that was one of the main reasons why we chose Google Forms, that, and because it's a free and great service that Google provides. So Chuck, this is perhaps answering a question about a copy of the mini survey. This is what we asked in that survey. Identifying information, just name and business name. The next question on business updates is just check boxes. So we try to make it as easy as possible for them to fill this out. So they check a box if they've changed their contact information or their business contact information, if they've started a business, developed a website, etc. We give them an opportunity to expand on any questions that they ask, and any boxes that they checked with any updates. Ask them about current business challenges, and then we just have an other box where they can fill in any other updates that they have. Chuck asked what system we use for messaging our clients. We looked at a bunch of different systems. The one we're using currently is EasyText, which has pros and cons, and we'll come to talk about it a little bit more. But it's free up to a certain number of text messages a month, and whatever that certain number is that I don't remember offhand was enough for us. So it actually is something that we're able to do without affecting our budget, which is really nice. Like I said, our main goal of the quarterly mini surveys is simply to stay in touch with our clients. Nielsen's kind of theory that makes it sound like it's not well thought out. Nielsen's found that when they work with organizations who regularly stay in touch with their clients in a way that's transactional, in a way that makes the clients feel like we really care about how they're doing and want to help them succeed, then it increases response rates during times when you want response rates to be high on long surveys. So those, even if clients don't answer the survey, just seeing that we're asking and we care about them is helpful. This process, the quarterly mini survey process, helps both our organization and our clients. It helps us because we do record the responses that come through in our database. This can be great for reporting successes, just getting a sense of how our clients are doing. It can sometimes be good if we're trying to hook up people with mentors in their industry, if we know that someone has a business running in a certain industry. We also, it's helpful for the clients because for any client who answers the question about experiencing challenges, we connect them to appropriate services. So one of the projects that I do every quarter is I create a sheet of any clients that say they're experiencing challenges, and then I hook them up with the appropriate program staff to be able to connect them to a service that will address that challenge. So those responses are helpful for clients and for our internal success stories. So annual long surveys, which like I said, we do in partnership with the Aspen Institute MicroTracker through the field program. This is a completely different kind of survey, and we use it for a completely different purpose. The methodology for this survey is that we survey a random sample. In our case, it's of 100 clients. That sample might be a different size for other organizations. And it's clients who received an intensive level of business services from us 2 years ago, in this case in 2016. We're asking about their experiences in 2017, both business and personal, just to get a sense of what updates they have for us. These surveys are conducted over the phone. Each survey takes about a half an hour or so. So as you can imagine, it's kind of an all hands on deck staff project where there's a team of surveyors who work together to get these surveys finished. The survey results are anonymous. We are just interested in kind of the aggregate information from these surveys. As opposed to the 6-question mini surveys, this is a much longer survey. It's 45 questions long. I didn't want to list all the questions for you, but just in general, it's asking questions related to their business in 2017, if they had any, their employees' job quality in 2017, if they had employees, and their household information. And it's quite in depth. It asks questions that clients might be hesitant to answer if the survey weren't anonymous, which is one of the many reasons why it is. And it ends up giving us a lot of really excellent data. The main goal of this survey is to make sure that we're helping our clients reach our goals, or to assess how well we're helping our clients reach their goals. As Sharon mentioned, we've been working with the Aspen Institute since 2004, and one of the huge benefits of that is we can see a history of our success metrics and see whether we're improving or staying the same, or it's a good way for us to sort of benchmark against our own past. It also lets us benchmark against other organizations that participate in the Aspen survey, or against kind of the average from the other organizations to see how well we're doing. The responses from the Aspen survey give us a lot of really valuable metrics. I just picked out some of them to share with you all. This is from the survey that we conducted in 2017. Of note in particular is the Start and Grow Small Businesses option there. 95% of business owners remain in business 1 year after receiving intensive level of service from Renaissance, and 49% of pre-business clients launched successfully within the first year. Those are numbers that are very helpful for us when we find ourselves having to estimate about how many businesses we started. It's not perfect, and we're always honest that it's an estimate, but I feel good about it because it's an estimate that's based on statistically sound data that was conducted not only through a random survey, but also kind of has a third-party stamp of approval on it. As part of our partnership with the Aspen Institute, it shows that it's legitimate more so than if we were just conducting it on our own. So these outcome metrics, like I said, help us estimate how many businesses we helped our clients start. They can help us estimate how many jobs we helped create and retain, et cetera, et cetera. It's really helpful to be able to answer questions about the org as a whole without having to get, a 100% survey response rate, which we all know would be very, very challenging. Okay. So I've mentioned some of the benefits of data analysis and of surveying. I've mentioned that it helps us report externally, it helps us track our progress towards our goals, and it helps us with marketing. I haven't yet mentioned a huge benefit that Sharon alluded to earlier, which is that it helps us make data-informed decisions. So this is a very simplified little chart that I made that is really something that we try to ingrain into our processes at Renaissance. We gather data all the time from intake paperwork, from surveys, from workshop evaluations at the end of every workshop, for example. We always look at the data. When Sharon was talking about the universal intake form that we have, for example, we thought carefully about what questions to put on that form, and we only put questions on there that we analyze and that we care about. And so any data we ask our clients for, we look at and analyze. If we notice something is off or something could be improved, we then create an improvement plan for it, and we actually implement that change. And then we gather data on that change to see how it works. And it's a cycle, it keeps going. Just to give a very simple example and a true example, we, for example, gather evaluation forms from our introductory class. A few years ago, those evaluations were showing that participants didn't really feel like they were ready for what was covered in the class. At the time, the class was 4 weeks long and focused a lot on financials. And these are for people who were trying to decide whether or not they wanted to start a business. So we looked at those evaluations, thought about how we could change it to make the class more relevant for that group of people. We planned to change the class length and change the curriculum. It moved from a 4-week class that focused largely on financials to a 6-week class that focused largely on identifying target market and business idea feasibility. Then we implemented that change. We worked really closely throughout this process with the consultants to teach that class. We marketed and we ended up launching the new class. And now we're sort of in the phase of gathering data on that new class and seeing how it works and continually improving from there. Okay, so taking a big step back here, we covered quite a bit in the last 20 minutes. Talking about gathering and reporting on baseline data or intake data, gathering and reporting on follow-up data from return visits or from our surveys. I went into our mini surveys and our annual survey that we do in partnership with the Aspen Institute. And I just am wondering if there are any additional questions that I can answer before we turn it over to Sarah and Joyce.
Yeah, I have a question. This is Heidi. How did you guys come to the conclusion that this is the direction you wanted to go in? And like, what did you do before? I mean, 'cause this seems like it's really the way that people should be collecting data. And I know that, a lot of nonprofits don't have a lot of capacity. And so tell us at the beginning of that and how that evolved.
The phone, I just put the phone on speaker and Sharon didn't hear the first part of that question. So Sharon, she was asking kind of how the process evolved to get to the point of where it is now, especially given that it takes a lot of staff time and a lot of capacity that some organizations don't have.
That is just totally true, that it did take a lot of time. And I think that probably the way we started that really doesn't take too much time is to start with this theory of change, which sounds complicated and is super simple. That is really identifying what you want your outcomes to be and going backwards from there. I mean, people do it the other way, but really, what are your top goals? What are you going to do to get there, and what do you need? I mean, if you have that part understood, then that's what you want to track for. So I think identifying like the top 3 things you want to track for is a great way to get started and build it up from there. It does take a lot of time, and that there's just no getting away from that. But I think if every person, and if it's one person or more, who works with clients and on programming, there has to be a really clear part of their job description that says 20% of your time is going to be for evaluation. So then it becomes part of the work process.
Another question came in.
Great.
I guess to double back, did that answer the question that you had?
Yeah. And Sharon, I think it's testament to your leadership that you thought about this. And I think, I guess I want you to just answer this quickly because we want to turn it over to Aspen in a minute. Was it worth it? Has it been worth it?
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
And
great.
I do want to say Kate is fantastic. So that is really a good best practices. Find someone spectacular like Kate to oversee your data. And
no, that's good.
Have a great
right.
program.
And that goes into the question about what percentage of your staff is involved with data collection, data entry?
Yeah, all of our program team staff, anyone who works with clients is involved at some level. And that could be just making sure we're collecting the forms that we need from clients when they come in the door for a workshop. All of our program team and then some is involved in our annual survey process as well. In terms of percentage of the staff?
About 75.
Yeah, about 75% have some form of program data as part of
it's not their main. It's not their main job description, but they do. They do it as part of the job. Yeah.
I think the only person whose main job description is data is me.
Right. Okay.
But I obviously can't gather all the data on my own.
Great. And Chuck, I see you want to know more about the text messaging program. I think we're going to wait on that, and we're going to hand it over to Joyce, and maybe if Kate wouldn't mind maybe sending me a little email out and saying what you use and what the pros and cons are.
I can share my my contact information in the chat box as well. Would everyone be able to see it?
Yep.
Okay. I'll type in my email address there. And Chuck, if you just send me an email, I'm happy to share what research we did on that.
Great. And we're gonna thank you guys tremendously for being on and great doing the work that you're doing. And now turn it over to Joyce Klein and Sarah Alvarez from Field at Aspen Institute. And we've been working with them for several years, I think since 2011 or 12 on the MicroTracker. And it opened today, and take it away.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, this is Joyce. I'm going to start off, and then I'm going to hand it off to Sarah partway through. So thanks to the Cameo team for inviting us to be with you today. And I'm really glad that you teed us up after Sharon and Kate because as you can tell, we've been working together, as they described, we've been working together for a long time, and they do an amazing job in their work. And I think it's really helpful to sort of start with the practitioner's perspective on data collection and use. And what we're going to try to do right now is focus a little bit more on sort of an industry-wide view to this issue, which is why to sort of and mostly about why you might want to participate in some of the work that we do at MicroTracker to help build the field as a whole, as well as to help do some of the things that Kate talked about, which is really understand your own work, look at it over time, and look at it relative to your peers. So just briefly, in case you don't know us, we're the Field Program. We're at the Aspen Institute, which is a national nonprofit. And our focus and our mission is to advance business ownership as an economic opportunity strategy. And so we're really interested in particular in opening opportunities to start and grow businesses to the folks who are most challenged to do that in our economy. So we focus a lot on the particular needs and issues of people of color, of women, of immigrants, and of others who face real challenges in accessing the money and the resources they need to grow their businesses. And the way that we try to advance this is by working closely with practitioners like all of you and including Kate and Sharon, to provide them with tools that help them to learn, to scale, and to innovate in their work. And the tools that we help with are research and evaluation and data collection, peer learning, and leadership development. We also do some work with funders who support the field as well, helping them to think about what their strategies are. So, one of the things that we've done in those areas of work, as I said, one of the big areas of work that we're engaged in is research and data collection and evaluation. And as part of that work, one of the things that we've done is worked with practitioners in the microenterprise field to help identify a common set of performance metrics to describe and report on their work and on the outcomes that their clients achieved. And we began to develop these metrics around 15 years ago, I think probably around 2004, as Sharon was discussing. And we did it through a collaborative process where we worked with between 20 and 30 microenterprise organizations who wanted to work with us on that process to help really think about what are the metrics that could really describe their work and describe whether they were achieving their mission and their goals as organizations. And so they really helped us think about what the right set of metrics were, tried not to make them too big a set of metrics because we know that data collection is expensive, and try to help work with them not only on what the metrics should be, but how easy or hard was it to collect and report on the data that was needed to generate those information on those metrics. So as we thought about that process, there were a couple of sort of principles that guided how we thought about collecting, sort of developing these metrics, and you can see them here. The first one is that we really wanted the data collection process to be primarily about learning and improving. So we wanted the data to be useful to the folks who were generating and reporting it, in other words, to the practitioners. So it wasn't just about how could we take data or someone take data out of organizations, but how to do it in a way that was adding value to the work that you do. And we also wanted to be really thoughtful, and I think this is really important, that because it always takes resources, as you could hear from Kate and Sharon, because it always takes resources to collect data, it's really important not to collect more data than you're actually going to use. So be thoughtful about why you want to collect that data, what it's going to help you do, and what kinds of decisions it's going to help inform as you think about that. So folks have referred to to MicroTracker throughout the webinar. And I just want to describe a little bit about MicroTracker. What it is, it's a project that we operate that offers a set of tools to help organizations to collect data on the metrics that we've identified as that common set of metrics, and then also allows us to collect that data and compile it across those participating organizations and offer it back both to the practitioners but also to key stakeholders in the industry. And the way we offer it back is through our microtracker.org website. So we're really trying to do two things with the data. The first is to build a set of data on the industry that we can use to educate and inform and advocate to key stakeholders like policymakers and funders and the media. And when I say we, I don't just mean field, I really mean all of us who care about this industry and think it needs resources and is something that should be supported. So that's the first thing we're trying to do. And the second thing we're trying to do is to give those of you who are working in the field access to information about not only what you're doing and what you're doing over time, but also what your peers are doing, so you can use that to strengthen your work. So again, this is a way that we just try not to make this extractive, but help make it a tool for you to be able to learn about your program and improve your program. And so MicroTracker is the umbrella work for that data work we do around that common set of metrics. And MicroTracker.org is the website where we house the data that we collect and some of the tools that support that data collection and that folks can go to access that data. So just briefly, this is a screenshot of the homepage for our MicroTracker.org site. And just briefly, some of the data that's on that site can be accessed for free, and some of it can be accessed for what we call a premium subscription, which is $300 a year. So one of the things I also wanted to be clear about is that there are actually two distinct data collection processes that are involved in collecting the data that that sits on MicroTracker, and that's because there are really two different sources and sets of data that sit on that site. So, and this gets back to some of the definitions or the ideas that Kate put out there. There's a set of data that comes from the intake data that you collect from your clients, which virtually every program collects some form of intake data, because you need a way to describe who the clients are that you're working with and be able to count how many of them there are. So that's what we would call sort of the intake data. And there's the output data, which relates to things that you do in the operations of your program. So that's data on things like, whether you offer classes or do coaching and what kind of services you offer and how many folks get those services and how many hours of service they get. It's also information about lending activity if you do lending. And it's also, in our case, we also collect some data that looks at, like, for example, how many staff you have and what it costs you so that you can sort of benchmark yourself against other organizations. And that's all data that we sort of call program data, because it's data that programs tend to collect in the regular course of their operation. So that's, if you look at this slide, that's the what you do as an organization set of data. The second type of data is the data that Kate talked a lot about, which is the data on client outcomes. What happens to or what the status is of your clients after they've received services. And the way you get that data is not by counting what you do as an organization. It's by going back to your clients, as Kate described, and getting that information from them, typically through a survey process. So that's the client outcomes data. And so we have two different data collection processes in MicroTracker that sit under MicroTracker that relate to those two different sources of data. So the first one is what we call the program level data, and we collect that through a process called the U.S. Microenterprise Census. The census is an online survey, annual survey that sits on the MicroTracker.org website that programs can use to submit data on these key performance metrics that look at things like how many clients you serve, what the diversity of those clients is, lending activity, business development services, program cost, and efficiency. That's the piece on how you talked about it open today. Today is the first day that we've had the 2017 census up on our website, and that survey is available for folks to begin to report data. And what we're going to do in a few minutes, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, and she's going to show you how you can report data with through the census. But before that, one of the things I want to show you is just sort of what's the kind of data that we can aggregate and share back with interested stakeholders in the fields through MicroTracker. So this is a snapshot of what our the data looks like from our annual microenterprise census. And so you can see what it allows us to really show is how many clients is the field reaching, what are the basic characteristics of those clients. I will note one of the things that's been really valuable, as you may know, there's increasingly a lot of interest in inclusion and how we begin to reach more entrepreneurs of color, more women entrepreneurs. one of the things that having this data allows us to show is that unlike many other kinds of institutions that are working with entrepreneurs, the microenterprise field really already does deeply reach those populations. So we can talk about what percent are entrepreneurs of color, what percent are women, what percent are low income. And we can talk about that sort of field-wide from the data we collect. We can also talk about what's the overall level of lending activity and things like that. And so the value of participating in the census is that it builds this industry-wide database that we can use to make the case for the work that we do. So we know funders and public agencies and the media look at it. Our data's been used by NerdWallet to talk about the micro-lending industry, and folks go on that and they find out about the industry, which people often say is sort of the best-kept secret in the entrepreneurship world. People just don't know we're out there. But it's also been used by like the New York Times and the Philadelphia Inquirer and other national newspapers when they want to talk about what this field looks like. It's also the tool that Cameo uses to collect data on its members. So Cameo helps us do outreach to organizations to ask them to report to the census. And in turn, we share with them data on every organization that tells us they're a Cameo member, so that what you don't have is someone at the national level asking you for data and someone in California, Cameo, asking you for data. We work together so you get that information. So the census is one piece, and we'll give you more information on that. The second piece that I want to talk about is the entrepreneur level data or the client outcomes data. That's through a process that we call MicroTracker. That's the one that Kate was referring to when they talk about doing that annual survey. And she gave you a sense of what those metrics are, so I won't talk about that. But this gives you a sense of the data that we're able to talk about. And this is the only sort of ongoing source of data on what happens to entrepreneurs who get services that we are aware of in the microenterprise field. So, and just so you know, so folks know, the microenterprise census is free for folks to fill out and just submit our data. We ask it just a way that we hope folks can contribute to the field. We clean that data and we post it on the site, both at an aggregate level, and we do profiles on each organization that does that. The Entrepreneur Tracker process is a fee-for-service process that we do with, generally there are about 20 to 30 organizations that do it with us each year. Some groups do it every year. Some groups do it every other year. I will say that we don't have any dedicated funding from anyone. No funder funds us to do this work. They did in the early years, but now they don't, and so we just figure out ways to do the census on our own, and the way that we support the client outcomes data through Entrepreneur Tracker, which is more time intensive for us, is by doing it on a fee-for-service basis. And the fee starts at $1,750 and goes up from there depending on how big the sample of clients is that an organization needs to work with to tell some reliable data. So before I turn it over to Sarah to tell a little bit more about the census and how you can participate on that, we just wanted to do a couple of polls just to get a sense of how much experience you have with this. So the first question we have is just, has your organization submitted data on your program through the U.S. Microenterprise Census in the past? So just let us know yes, no, or if you don't know, that's fine. We understand you may not. So you can just click and let us know. I'm just going to give folks a sec to respond. It looks like about 10 folks have, and I know there are more. So keep it coming. Just going to give it one more second. Right now it looks like a little more than half of you have done the census before, but there are some of you who haven't and some of you who don't know. So we will spend a little time letting you know how to do that. So okay, great. So just quickly, you're going to get some results. So you see about half of you say you have, 30% say you don't know, and about 15% of you say you haven't. So thanks to many of you for having done it before. It's very helpful to Cameo. It's very helpful to us. So the second thing we want to know is if your organization decides to respond to the census this year, what will your role be? So some of you may be the person that says, yes, we're going to do this, but you tell somebody else to do it. Some of you will actually be the person who pulls together the data and puts it into the survey and sends it back to us. Some of you will do both. Some of you may not do either of those. It'll be someone else. And some of you may not know who that person is. And again, we're just trying to use this to figure out what level to gauge the rest of our presentation on. But so that will be helpful to know. So just going to give folks one more second. Okay. It looks like some of you may be actually the decent number of folks. I'm going to show you the results. Will either be about half of you will either be the respondent or be the respondent and the decision maker. So for that, we're going to give you a little bit of a sense of what it's like to be on the census, and Sarah is going to respond to the census, how you do that through the site. I will note that there actually also is a video on the site that gives you a little bit of this flavor, but we'll walk through it here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah.
Okay, awesome. Hi, everyone. Great to be on with you this afternoon. As Joyce noted, I'm going to get my slide up here. As Joyce noted, the U.S. Microenterprise Census is a free online annual survey that programs like yours use to submit data on key performance metrics on what you do. So both Field and Cameo hope that you will report your data this year. The survey, as Heidi, I believe, mentioned, is now open. And so I'm going to give you an overview of how to navigate MicroTracker.org and access the U.S. Microenterprise Census Survey. So on this first slide here, we have a couple of ways to get to the census from different parts of the site. But the easiest way is to just click on the Report Your Data to the Census. It's at the bottom of the home screen usually, and I have a screenshot here for you. You'll see that there is a video here that provides, as Joyce mentioned, a short demo on how to respond to the census. So I'm going to cover some of the information here, and then you can always refer back to that video for more details. So if you don't already have a MicroTracker.org account, which sounds like some of you may not, you'll need to create one. It's very simple. You just need an email address to sign up, and it's free. If you've created an account already and you're having issues accessing it, just please reach out to me, and I'll post my email address here after the presentation. So you'll see here's a screenshot of just logging on and getting an account set up. So this is what the homepage of the U.S. Microenterprise Survey looks like. From this page, you'll be able to click on the U.S. Microenterprise Survey link, which I'll show you in a second. And then you will also be able to download a PDF of the survey. So I'm going to just show you really quickly. And if you just see on the right hand of your screen is where the video is for you to kind of come back and watch another demo. Here is a PDF of the MicroEnterprise Survey. It offers helpful hints, and it may be useful to print a copy of the PDF as a reference for when you're going through the survey. But it's also helpful to print it out and review prior to doing the survey. Sometimes you need to speak with people and gather information from multiple places or systems in your organization to answer the questions. So this can kind of help you plan out how to do that and give you kind of a heads up of what to expect. So in getting started, if you've already submitted data or are currently working on submitting data, that is, you've already started the survey, you'll see an additional section on this page titled Select an Organization, and you'll see the census data that you're currently working on. And so as you see here, I'll show you what it looks like to be working on a survey that I've already started. And so if you're starting a new census survey this year, please click Provide the name of your organization, and then you're going to begin typing the name of your organization. And so just to kind of help manage internal staff working on this, if you or a staff member has submitted data in the past, you'll see it in the light blue drop-down menu. And if you're new to the census, you'll type your program's name in and just click Next. So now we'll look at the profile page where you will be asked if you are submitting data for 2016 or 2017. So Field and Cameo are now beginning to ask organizations like yours to report their 2017 data, and we hope that you will take advantage of that opportunity. If you didn't report data last year from 2016, you can also add that now, you'll begin by providing basic information about your program, such as name, website, office address, and primary contact information. The person filling out the survey would be the primary contact person. So if you responded to the census before, this part of the page will already be filled in with your organizational information. You'll just need to check that everything is still accurate and up to date before hitting save and continue. So the survey starts off by asking you questions about membership, your organization's description, designations, and program foci. It's important that you provide this information because later it will allow you to filter the data on the site to compare yourself to organizations that are similar to yours. So there's about 7 or 8 questions on this particular page, but I would just draw your attention to question 3A. This is where you can indicate that you're a Cameo member so that we can share your data with their team. Question 3A basically is regarding your designation, any designations that your program has. So in this case, you would select Other and write in Cameo. After providing your data, make sure to hit Save and Continue. It's fairly straightforward. You can also navigate to specific parts of the survey by scrolling to the top of the survey and clicking Go to Section. So at this point, it's just helpful to remind you that you can save and come back to your survey at a later time, and you can access it through the original set of instructions that I just shared. And at the same time, you can also navigate to specific parts of the survey to pick up where you left off. So there seems to be a question here. This is a question about copies of slides. That is not for me. So now I'll walk you through a live demo of the rest of the census survey. So let me just give you 1 second while I share my screen so that you can see what I see, and then I can walk you through.
So I'm just going to jump in for a sec because I think we're at time, and I just want to check in with Andrew and just say, do you want us to keep going at this point, or do you want to take questions? I want to be respectful for the time that people may start dropping off. So do you want us to just stop and see if there are any questions and then go on with the demo if people want to stay or see that, or?
I think that's fair. We'll open up the floor for questions. If you have questions, just go ahead and type them into chat now, and we'll take the next however many minutes to answer those. And then once that's kind of wrapped up, we'll go ahead with the presentation. Okay, great. Like we said, most of what we'll cover in the demo very quickly is in the video that's on the site, so it'll be there. There just maybe, Sarah, I'm wondering if we just want to cover some of the, just run through the different categories that folks can report and maybe talk a little bit why some of them are important. Okay, great.
So, sorry, has anyone has questions? I can't see on mine, doesn't have it anymore.
No, I don't see any questions.
Okay, so just feel free to chat anything in, but first I think what would make sense, like Joyce was mentioning, is to draw your attention to one area of the survey that's changed if you've participated in the past. So I'm scanning through right now the program information page. I just told you about question 3A here, where you can give your designation and select Other to plug in Cameo. Down here on question 5, I wanted to just draw your attention to a slight change in terminology around business service. So in previous years, we've used the term training and technical assistance to describe the delivery of business development services or business support services, including business training, technical assistance, counseling, and coaching. And so the industry is, as many of you may know, moving away from the term technical assistance. So we've changed the census survey language to refer to these as business development services, a term that we have used intermittently in the past with past census surveys. So these are non-financial services, which include business training, technical assistance, counseling, and coaching, access to market services, technology services. The whole definition is there. So for those of you who completed the census in the past, changing this terminology will not affect the longitudinal tracking that we've been undertaking, but it will align better with the U.S. microenterprise. It will align the survey better with industry terminology. Just wanted to draw your attention to that. On the next page, so I'm going to just kind of breeze through fairly quickly by using the go-to section feature to just call out some other areas that may be important to just be aware of. So under microfinance products and services, this is where you'll offer details about the products and services that your organizations offer. So if you just kind of scrolling down to this question 7, oh, let me go back actually, that's not what I wanted. Let me go scroll down. So this area just asks you the types of products and services that you offer. And so what will happen is that if you answer no to any of these questions early on, that a certain set of questions will not appear in the survey. It's just sort of queuing up questions that are relevant. So next we'll move on to demographic information, just a plug for really making an effort to complete this part of the survey. Sometimes people skip over this and we find that it's really helpful, just sort of for the purposes of giving you a definition of significant level of service and clients. As with our client outcome survey, we define clients as individuals who have received a significant level of service, which is essentially, you will end up defining that, but we advise that it's a service your program believes can be traced to your program. And so again, throughout this review, just as you were filling out the survey, you'd click Save and Continue. I think I'm looking.
You want me to just jump in and add a couple of things? So one is that, just a couple things really quickly. One is, one of the things that we know is harder and takes a little bit longer for folks to figure out is data on the income levels of their clients. But most folks have to track this data because many of their funders require it. And even though it can be time consuming, it's really helpful because we do find it's something that funders ask a lot about is are folks low income that organizations are serving? So that's important. We ask information on staff and budget size, and this again helps you to sort of calibrate against and get a sense of sort of whether your costs align up with others in the industry, and how much it costs. Again, another question that we get asked a lot by funders and policymakers about how much does this cost and how much does it cost relative to other kinds of things that we might choose to fund. The other thing I will just say is just because we've been doing this for a number of years, there are a couple things we've tried to do to make it as easy as we can for folks to respond. So one is, as Sarah noted, you can save at the bottom of every page, and you can come back later and fill it out because we know it's really frustrating when you start to fill out a survey and it forces you to answer everything and you get interrupted and it makes you not want to come back. So you can always save and you can always come back, I think is important. The other thing is, as you start to fill pieces out, if it becomes there's a lot of internal logic written in so that we'll stop asking you questions, for example, about your lending if you already told us you don't do lending. And the other thing is that there are some places where we've built in some sort of internal logic so that your answers have to make sense internally, and that just although it can slow you down in responding because it does force you to make sure your answer makes sense, it does save us from having to call you, both us and you, from having us call you up later and say, your answer doesn't make any sense. And the other thing I will say is there are not that many questions which are actually mandatory. So if you find that there are questions that are just hard for you to answer or that don't make sense, you can skip them. We do encourage you to be as, to do as much as you can because it helps you and it helps the industry and it helps Cameo. But we don't have a ton of mandatory questions because we know how hard that is. So I think that's the most important thing. And the other thing I will say is that, again, the piece that is useful is the ability to come back later. And to be able to look at yourself relative to other organizations. And we do have different tools and demos available on the site that show you how to do that if that's something you're interested in doing. So with that, I think we'll stop and see if there are any other questions and let Andrew decide how he wants to move forward.
All right, well, why don't we go ahead and unmute everyone? So if anybody has a question, now's the time to ask it.
The conference has been unmuted.
All right. Does anyone have a question for Joyce and Sarah before we wrap up today? I think that sounds like a no. Joyce, Sarah, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to make?
I don't think so. We want to just, again, I sent out Sarah's email address already via the chat, but folks should feel free to reach out if they have any questions about the census, any questions about data. If they want to learn more about Entrepreneur Tracker, we're here and we'd love to talk to them.
Great. And just like every year, Cameo is offering a $100 staff lunch to any organization that completes the census in the next several months. So if you are the person to fill out your survey or the person in charge of making sure that other people fill out the survey, once you've completed it, just email me. My email address is aseko@microbiz.org. That's ASEKO @microbiz.org, and we will get you set up with your $100 lunch. Other than that, I want to thank everybody for presenting today and everybody for attending. I think this has been a really fruitful conversation and presentation, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.